Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Divorce Coalition Live show. We're a show designed for divorce professionals, specifically to increase education and awareness and create process change so that we have a more supportive and less traumatic divorce experience for domestic abuse survivors. We have united top podcast hosts and divorce professionals to create systematic change in the divorce process. With 23.5% of divorces which cite domestic violence as a cause, we bring you the experts and advice so that you can have knowledge is power. So without further ado, let's get started. In today's world of divorce, the legal system plays a critical role. For domestic abuse survivors going through divorce, the system can either help or harm. When one spouse uses the legal system to inflict pain and harassment, we call that legal abuse. Today, I'm asking my guest, who I've asked to return because I love what she has to say, Tracy Moore-Grant, the founder of the Amicable Divorce Network, to share her expertise as to how legal abuse can be identified and what divorce professionals can do. Hey, Tracy, how are you doing? I am so thrilled to have you back.
I'm good, Beverly. Thank you so much for having me. I love being a guest on your show.
Oh, we're glad to have you. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I am first and foremost a family law attorney. I have been an attorney since 2002, and I'm also a family law mediator. I've been mediating, I think, since 2013, so a little over 10 years, and I'm also a domestic violence certified mediator. I'm also an arbitrator, which vests me with the authority to make decisions in cases, and sometimes that comes up as well. And I'm also a trained parent coordinator, which is like having a private mediator, arbitrator for parties who have parenting disputes.
And so what do you do in your spare time with all of that going on?
So in my spare time, I work on everything involving the Amicable Divorce Network. I founded it about 5 years ago. We're about to have our 5-year celebration coming up, and it is the only organization in the world that vets divorce industry professionals for being resolution focused, experienced in their field, and engaging in fair billing practices. We also have an out-of-court process to help people get divorced in an efficient manner, and it's all hosted on a technology platform. So we try to cover all of the bases to help people divorce well and efficiently and in a child-focused manner.
Absolutely. And I am proud to be a member.
We're proud to have you. Thank you.
So let's get right to the heart of the topic. Can you share with the audience what is legal abuse? What does it look like?
Yeah, so first of all, you generally need to have a pending suit in the court system for somebody to inflict legal abuse. And it could be the threats of legal abuse, but most often we see it as the actual actions. So let's say you're in a divorce context and you have a traditional sort of husband-wife. I'll just use those genders to make it clear for our audience about who's doing what. And you could have a situation where, for example, the husband says, if you don't let me see our child on Sunday, I'm going to file this against you. Gotcha. And they may or may not be valid claims, but they make these threats in order to cause a particular reaction, whether it's the actual visitation or the stress, or they want to make the other person angry. That is one form where you just see these threats. And I hear this from clients all the time. Like, they told me they're going to file something and take my children. And when you assess the facts, there's no basis for that. The person is not an addict, is mentally healthy, is a fully thriving individual. So that claim would not be one that is valid. But a lot of people say things like that when they're going through a divorce. And it might not rise to the level of abusive litigation is sort of the term that we use. I'm out of Georgia, and so that's we have a statute here for abusive litigation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and not every state has it, so it's something to look for in your particular state. But abusive litigation would be the actual filing of things in the court system repetitively over and over. I've heard from people that say their soon-to-be former spouse files something in their case every Friday afternoon to ruin their weekend. Or
That's yeah.
yes, you told me that. Or they file it on a holiday, on a birthday, to ruin a special event or something that might be happy. Right before they know that person is going on vacation with the children, they do something because they're really trying to ruin it. And so it really is the abuse or threatened abuse of the legal process. And it could be the filing of motions, civil or criminal. I was sharing with you a story where, as an attorney representing a client, and in both situations were the victims of domestic violence by, a true covert narcissist. And in those situations, the opposing party tried to have me as the attorney arrested. So,
wow.
And I've seen that happen as well.
What grounds were they citing?
So in one situation, the client had damage to their home, a roof damage, and a check had come in the mail made out to the parties jointly. And only the husband signed it, took it to the bank and cashed it, and did not use the money for the roof repair. And so I had advised my client to alert the insurance agency that her name was forged on the check, and to, reissue the check or handle it however, which is, I think the appropriate advice. That opposing client then tried to have me arrested. And I don't even really remember the grounds, but they filed a warrant for my arrest. I had to go to court. One of my law partners came in and represented me. My parents showed up. They were very worried about the whole situation, even though I knew it wasn't going to be anything. They brought in a visiting judge because none of the judges in our jurisdiction could sit on a case involving me. And the judge basically gave the other person the riot act, and it was thrown out. And so that was that situation. But look at all the turmoil it caused, right?
Yes.
Like, I had to take a day off work. My partner had to take a day off work. Everybody was engaged in this, trying to bully me essentially. And so it really is a bullying tactic. And so when when you have a case in the court system, it invites that sort of potential disaster.
And I think it can also be a financial abuse weapon, because every one of these motions is racking up costs.
Absolutely. So when somebody files a motion, and it could be completely frivolous, you could read it and it says they are in contempt of court for not wearing purple pants every day, and I want them to wear purple pants. It could say complete gibberish, right? Even if it's complete gibberish, it still goes through the same process as a legal motion that has a lot of validity to it. So you have to respond through counsel within a certain number of days. The court sets it on a calendar to have a hearing. And perhaps at that hearing, they say, this is rubbish and we are throwing this out. That's the response you hope to receive. It still has to go through all of those steps, which costs you money to have to react to and have your attorney respond to properly. Because if you don't do that, then by default, they could win that motion because you haven't responded to it.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I've seen that's similar is the one attorney keeps sending letters to the other attorney, needing them to respond. One in particular was for a charge of $3.12. And so even though it isn't a technical motion in court, it still incurs legal costs of the counsel and creates kind of a harassment, in a sense, of the victim.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me talk about what you just brought up in sort of a different way. Okay. So there are generally two types of family law attorneys. There are those that diffuse conflict, and there are those that increase conflict. So in the Amicable Divorce Network, we have many attorneys who litigate, that they are the ones who look for solutions. And the attorney sending a letter over $3.20, shame on them. Right. If a client came to me and said, you need to send a letter about this, my response would be, that really isn't worth you paying me the time or the other attorney let's just let that one go. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to charge you to do that. That doesn't make a lot of sense. But there are tons of attorneys out there who just act like a megaphone of the client's crazy behavior, and they're getting paid to do that. And they don't have any sort of client control or filter to say to the client, I'm not going to do this. That doesn't make a lot of sense. And so in that way, those types of attorneys are really part of the problem as well.
Do you think that those attorneys are in some way conflict averse in terms of conflict with their client? Because the clients really, as you said, using this emotional craziness to tell the lawyer to do things, why would an attorney go along with it? Is it just so they can have billable hours?
It could be billable hours. It could be because they don't want to get fired by the client, which again comes back to money. But the reality is I want to stand in front of a judge. And when they look at me, they know my professional reputation is I'm not standing there asking for anything frivolous. Everything I have filed with the court and wasted the court's time with or taken up the court's time with isn't wasteful. I'm making valid arguments with proof. And those attorneys probably have a bad reputation in front of the court because they aren't filtering things and they're putting frivolous things in front of the court. It could be that they are also personality disordered. It could be that they thrive on conflict. It could be financially motivated, that they are happy to take a few $100s to file these motions and go through the chain of events. It could be a variety of reasons, but those are people that, within our network, we don't allow in and don't work with. But it's hard to tell where these bad eggs, where they turned bad or what the issue is. I think there's a multitude of issues there.
So then that begs the question, is legal abuse seen only when divorce goes to court? Can it be seen in other scenarios?
Yeah, certainly whenever you have an underlying conflict that could be resolved in the court system, or that's how it will get resolved, you have the potential for people to be threatening one another. I'm going to file this motion. I'm going to do these things. And so you could have that potential. Now, when you do actually have a case filed in the court system, they do then have a step up. They have a case number to file it under, they know the court procedure. It does demand a response. And so having a matter in the court system does give that extra level of ability to commit the legal abuse.
Now, there's another example I've heard, and I kind of wonder whether it's legal abuse or not, but an abuser can be very cunning.
Oh, sure.
And so before it may even go to court, they create conflict with the other party, with the survivor. And the survivor gets so emotionally charged because this abuser keeps harassing and harassing and harassing that the victim throws a coffee cup. And then the abuser calls the police on the survivor as a domestic abuse claim. Now, how would you categorize that?
I think that would probably fall under the criminal element of the abuse or legal abuse, because you do see where the victim, in the totality of the circumstances, that the perpetrator then flips the script on them. Any opportunity that they get, the straw that broke the camel's back, that moment when they finally got pushed to the brink, they are trying to do that, and they will use every opportunity. Another example I see a lot is, let's say the victim is 2 minutes late to exchange the child for visitation. They're filing contempt of court. They're calling the police, or they call the police to accompany them to every visitation exchange. And how that sort of trickles down is that the child then has this attitude of, something about this parent isn't safe. The police are always here. This parent's always calling the police. And, there's just so many different nuances. And the police, you call them, you say there's an issue, they're going to come out. They're not going to filter that and say, I don't really think that this is a problem. you call them and you say you have a problem, they will be there. And so a lot of times that is something that we see as well that's used as legal abuse.
Gotcha. So who do you think is more likely to instigate legal abuse?
I think definitely the perpetrator of domestic violence, because
Right.
what we see is the court case is now the last step, so to speak, where they're connected to one another. And now the victim
Right.
is pulling away and they are making a new life, and they are, trying to get away from this. And sometimes the victim
They're
has put
losing
things,
power and control.
yeah. Yeah. And so sometimes the victims also put things in the paperwork saying, I'm a victim of domestic violence, or things like, or this, which is completely valid, but sometimes it adds fuel to the fire. And so we see that the perpetrator is trying to do anything that they can, because now they don't live together. Now they're getting a divorce, and now they're losing control over this person. And the last thing they have is a court process, and they are going to make it as miserable as possible. And, because it's sort of the attitude, if you want to get away from me, I'm going to make it as hard on you as possible, as expensive on you as possible. And so when I represent a client in domestic violence, I'm always telling, this is going to be an uphill battle. It is going to be hard. But when we get to the top of that mountain and get through this, it's all downhill from there.
Gotcha. Great advice. What would you say are the warning signs? Are there any alarm bells that can go off that say you think this might be coming in the future, so that you could prepare?
Yeah, I mean, one thing to always be aware of is, especially if you have minor children, even though you get divorced, there are actions that can come post-divorce. Some
Gotcha.
common ones, and people use legal abuse to continue to file motions and continue to file new actions once the divorce is final. Some
Gotcha.
examples might be to modify custody of the children, to modify child support, to modify visitation, or to hold one party in contempt for not following the rules. And so a lot of times with legal abuse, we see then the repetitive filing of actions post-divorce, because they are still trying to get at the victim any way that they can. And a lot of times that's through the minor children, because they know that's where they can hurt them.
So what is the overall effect of legal abuse on the survivor?
I mean, it is emotionally damaging and it is financially damaging. So they obviously get very upset anytime that these motions are filed. Sometimes they contain false allegations, things that shouldn't go to court, a lot of petty things, like the perpetrator is reading things very black and white, and they would file a motion for contempt if you are 2 minutes late, if the reimbursement on that medical expense was 1 penny off, things that attorneys really should filter out. They will find an attorney to work with them who will file every single one of these petty motions, and then the victim has to respond to protect themselves legally, because if they don't, by default, the perpetrator could win the motion. And so they usually have an attorney they're having to pay, and go through all of these items, because only really if multiple motions, multiple actions are deemed adjudicated by the court to be frivolous, only then can the victim recover financially some amount of money from the person who continues to file these things. But unfortunately, I don't know that I have ever seen a judge, and I've been doing this over 20 years, actually find abusive litigation in a case, and hold the person and the attorney responsible, because they should both be held responsible, because the attorney isn't filtering out the frivolous claims for the court.
Exactly.
And it's just such a long road, because most cases settle, and people are fatigued. They don't want to pay the cost of going to trial. So they're just like, give them what they want. I just want this to be over. So very few people have the financial and emotional stamina to take it to the end. And even then, judges, unfortunately, I don't see them taking it very seriously. I would love to hear of cases where judges do. Reach out to me and tell me about those. I'd love to hear about it.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick break. Domestic abuse survivors experience a lack of trust in the divorce and legal systems in place to protect them. Research shows that many report re-traumatization in court and have reported that legal professionals have verbally threatened them, mocked them, did not give them a chance to speak in court, exaggerated the survivor's faults, and provoked them to elicit emotional reactions. In other cases, divorce professionals may be the first point of contact for survivors with the ability to help if they recognize the signs. The Divorce Coalition is a nonprofit organization created to change this experience for abuse victims and survivors through the education and awareness of divorce professionals. For more information, you can go to divorcecoalition.com. Please consider supporting us by making a tax-deductible donation at divorcecoalition.com/donate-now. And now we're going back to the show. So Tracy, we talked a little bit about, what's going on in the realm of legal abuse. How can, or what should a divorce professional know about legal abuse?
I think they need to know that in a lot of states, it is something where if they're participating in it, they could potentially get in ethical and financial trouble. A lot of statutes do say that if they're participating in this, they can be fined or liable for the other side's attorney's fees. And so it's important to know that part of your responsibility is to the court to make sure that claims put in front of the court are valid and supported by evidence. And that's your duty as an attorney. And so you should be able to say no to your clients if they're asking for you to participate in this, because it can really hurt you financially and professionally. If you are representing the victim, you need to know that this is a form of domestic violence, and you need to be very well versed in how to handle it properly. And that, documentation is key. Filing those responses is key. Getting in front of the judge and having orders that declare that the action was frivolous are key. Because really only if the client is punished at some point by the court in a way that they find very uncomfortable, not a $200 fine, not I'm just going to dismiss this. But the court needs to be issuing orders that are, this person can't file any more motions unless it's approved by the court. I've seen that. Or a special master from the court. This person and their attorney are being assessed all of the attorney's fees plus a frivolous litigation penalty if that's available in your state. And you need to be prepared to educate the court on abusive litigation, that it is a form of domestic violence, that it is harmful, that the other person is engaging in it, and what available remedies there are to the court. Because do not assume that the judges just know this because it's a statute. And if you don't have a statute in your state, you might need to call an expert to get your client the protection and remedy that they need from this process.
Absolutely. And to go to an earlier point you made about children being pulled into it, for the divorce professionals in courts to know that this can create damage to the child as well.
Yeah, absolutely. They are in these environments that are very tense. It's keeping the tension from the divorce active. It's, and that's the whole point of the abuser, right? Is to create an emotional reaction. It takes away the finances and the attention of the parents, and, really continues to keep people in this stress bubble as opposed to moving forward separately and healing.
Gotcha. So how can a divorce professional prepare for or handle legal abuse?
I think the first thing is to be very well versed in any state statute that you have that addresses legal abuse or abusive litigation, and understand what the requirements are in your state to prove that case and to be gathering that information. And you always need to keep a very firm line with the other attorney. Like this, for me personally, if somebody sent me a letter about $3.20, I wouldn't respond to it. I'm not required to respond to a letter, and I'm not going to charge my client to respond to a letter like that. And so if they go to court and they say they didn't respond to our letter, it would be like, yeah, I mean, like, why? Like, that doesn't make, much sense. Separately, take some time to learn about this aspect of domestic violence and know how to recognize it. If you have somebody and maybe you're the third attorney because other attorneys have gotten fatigued on the case,
Yes.
understand, what it is that you're walking into. Because a lot of times, like I said previously in that example, the opposing client will go after the attorney. They try to villainize anybody that they can that's helping the victim. And and I've had that certainly in cases. So understand what it is you're walking into and be prepared and ready to do that, to do the best job for your client. So really take some time to learn about legal abuse, spotting it and handling it. And also find somebody in your area that would be a good expert for you, a domestic violence professional that could come to court and testify and say that this is a form of domestic violence and exactly the effects for the court. Because having that type of professional and information can really, really help your client prevail in that type of lawsuit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So beyond the, let's say the attorney, if you will, what can a judge do about legal abuse, or what would you want a judge to do about legal abuse?
Yeah, what I would want them to do is rarely I've really never seen it personally. And what I would want them to do is to issue orders declaring that litigation abuse, or we call it abusive litigation in Georgia, has occurred in this particular case, that it was perpetrated by this person and the attorney, because the person, they could be filing these things pro se. And so in that situation, you don't have any attorneys. But if there is an attorney involved, the order needs to be against the person, the perpetrator, and the attorney. And it needs to have as hefty a financial price tag on it as possible. Because only when people are really penalized in this way do they stop this type of abuse. It doesn't mean they won't pivot to something else. But this is a very successful way for people to abuse others, because it is so rarely followed through with by the court in any sort of penalizing manner. They might just dismiss the motion and say this was frivolous. That's great, but it took us $3,000 to get here in front of this court, and that's 100% their fault. So issue an order that says that to make it stop.
Absolutely. Then step back beyond the attorney and the judge. What can be done, I guess, as a whole? I don't know if it's society. I don't know if it's the legal profession, but is there anything out, or maybe even legislation, what can be done about legal abuse?
I do think there needs to be a lot more education, particularly to judges and their staff. Every year, judges have a training in Georgia. I know they go to seminars, but the reality is in Georgia and many other jurisdictions, judges that hear family law cases also hear a variety of matters. It could be a car accident, a murder. They could hear criminal. So their education that they are getting is in all of these different topics. And so they rarely get any sort of training on the nuances of domestic violence. And I would love to see if they are sitting in family law cases that on an annual basis, attorneys and judges need to have training on domestic violence in order to take those types of cases. And that litigation abuse in particular is something that's really focused on, because the only way it's going to stop is with attorneys not taking those cases and with judges issuing very harsh orders. And I think it just comes from a lack of education. And so it should be mandatory, because they're the only people who can protect this process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Tracy, this has been so illuminating. We could go on and on about it. How can our audience find you?
You're welcome to email me. My direct email is Tracy, and that's TRACY @amicableddivorcenetwork.com. My law firm is Patterson Moore Butler, and we are located in Georgia. You can Google that and find us and give me a call if I can assist you in any way. And if you'd like a referral to any of our professionals who are all over the world with the Amicable Divorce Network, for those that are vetted for being able to help you, you can head to amicableddivorcenetwork.com and look in our membership directory to see if there's someone near you.
Wonderful. And I thought of another question, and that is, how can a attorney prepare the client for legal abuse? How can the attorney interact? How should attorney treat the client? And how does that all play into this scenario?
Well, I think first and foremost is you need to have an attorney that relates very well to the client and that the client trusts. I hate to say this, but there are attorneys who just don't care. They
Right.
may understand, oh, these motions are frivolous, but they really don't have a good rapport with the client, and that can really break down in trust. So if you are the client, make sure that you're hiring somebody who you feel really understands you and communicates with you well and realistically and directly. And so one thing is to also be, I think, very realistic with your clients. If you see this happening in a case, you need to sit them down and say, I think that this is litigation abuse, and here's why I think this. And here is what we need to do to build your case for this. And this is what I'm going to need from you. And I'm so sorry, but this is going to be a long and hard road, but I do expect a particular result at the end, hopefully with this particular judge that we have. And it's also to be really sensitive to the victims. I've heard and seen where people just send things without any explanation, motions that they receive from the court, and just send it and dump it on the client. And it needs to be, maybe you have a different office procedure for that. Maybe the attorney reaches out directly to the client, even if they can only leave a voicemail or sends a message with it. What I normally do is say, we received this motion today. I have reviewed this. I think that this is utter rubbish. We will be responding to this, that it is not valid. I want you to know that. I do want you to get a copy, but I want you to know how I'm going to be handling this for you, so that the client isn't in a state of anxiety, wondering what the next steps are or what the attorney thinks about it. So sometimes in those cases, as opposed to the routine of paralegals sending things out at the end of the day, which is a lot of people's office procedure, think about enacting something different in these cases so that the clients have a little bit more peace and understanding about what's going on.
And I think the point you made too about judges, and that judges can be handling 30, 40 cases a day. Some are car accidents, whatever. I think helping that client with expectations.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of times a client comes in and says, well, they'll understand how I feel and rule in my favor. And then they're disappointed when they're not. So helping that survivor get a clear expectation of not only your role as the attorney and their role as the client, but also that court personnel as well.
Yeah, clients really need to understand the court system is a very flawed way to resolve a dispute. And judges, they're often surprised to hear that the judge is hearing family law cases today. And yesterday they finished a murder trial, and tomorrow they have a trial about land use. And so they are spread across many topics and, have many pressures on their time. Generally, statutorily, criminal issues take priority over civil family law cases. And so those often get pushed to the side. And so it's important to know that the judge, often is the person who gets to know the least about your case. You know the most, your attorney knows second most, as well as your probably friends and family that you confide in. And the judge gets a snapshot of your family and the situation and has the least amount of information and time with you to make the most impactful decision.
Absolutely. And even if a judge comes to court with a very thick file, it may be because of everything going on with that judge that they don't necessarily remember everything about the case.
There's just no way.
You need to make sure bring it back to the forefront.
Yeah, hit the highlights for them. Be prepared, that they don't remember. They may not remember the hearing you had 2 months ago. They have multiple hearings a day, every single day. So don't assume that they've gone at home at night and worried about you and your case, because they don't have the ability to do that. So be prepared to go in and remind them and hit the highlights, have documentation for everything that you say, because they're very famous for saying, oh, this was just a he said, she said. And I can't really determine what went on here, but you want to come in with the text messages, with the pictures, with the timestamps, with the documentation to show your side of the case.
Gotcha. Tracy, thank you so much for being my guest today. This is, again, another wonderful episode that you've helped us put on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
To my audience, thank you for being with Tracy and myself on this episode of Divorce Coalition Live. If you would like to listen to this episode again, you can find the link at divorcecoalition.com on the live show tab. All of Tracy's information will be available in the show notes. We have a special gift for you, a free ebook called Stop Condoning Domestic Violence. And you can find it at divorcecoalition.com/stop-condoning-ebook or under our resources tab. You can find Divorce Coalition at divorcecoalition.com. Please like and share our Instagram page at Divorce Coalition page. Join us in this fight to change an abuse survivor's divorce journey. Stay tuned next Thursday at 10 Eastern Standard Time for another episode. We want to improve the divorce experience for abuse survivors. Until next time, help us spread the word, learn more about and become aware of the true state of domestic abuse in divorce. Thank you and take care.